The restaurant was buzzing with the soft clatter of cutlery and quiet conversations, a place where every detail spoke of luxury. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting the light in gentle patterns across polished wooden tables. Outside, the streets were lined with high-end boutiques and cafes, but inside, it felt like another world, removed from the ordinary struggles of life. Among the servers, one young woman moved with quiet efficiency, balancing plates, refilling glasses, and offering smiles that were both warm and polite. She wore a crisp uniform that was slightly oversized, hiding her slender frame, and her hair was neatly tied back to keep it from falling into her face while she worked. Her movements were practiced and careful, a dance she had perfected over months of long shifts. She had been working at the restaurant for a little over a year. It wasn't her dream job, but it paid the bills and allowed her to support her family. Her life outside the restaurant was simple, mostly revolving around home, study, and helping with chores. She had ambitions, of course, quiet dreams of one day traveling, of learning more languages, and of making a life that felt larger than the small apartment she called home. But those dreams were tucked away for now, kept safe in notebooks and private thoughts. At work, she was known for her reliability. Regular customers noticed her calm demeanor, the way she remembered their preferences, and the polite way she corrected minor mistakes without making a fuss. Her colleagues admired her for her dedication, though some secretly envied the way she carried herself with a kind of quiet dignity that never demanded attention but still earned it. That evening, the atmosphere in the restaurant was slightly different. A group of well-dressed men had entered, drawing the attention of servers and patrons alike. Their presence brought with it an air of power, their suits crisp and tailored, their watches glinting under the soft lights. They spoke in hushed tones, the kind of conversation that hinted at wealth, influence, and connections. When they were seated, it was clear that this was no ordinary party. They were accustomed to attention and expected it wherever they went. The young woman approached their table with her usual calm, carrying a tray of drinks. She set them down carefully, offering menus with a smile. The men barely looked at the menus, discussing their order in short, confident sentences. One of them, noticeably older than the others and carrying himself with a certain arrogance, spoke with a tone that suggested he was used to having things done his way. He was the billionaire, though she had no way of knowing this at first glance. To her, he was just another customer, another table to serve, and she treated him with the same professional courtesy she offered everyone else. She had noticed him before, of course, in magazines and online. He was a name that came up in business articles and social media posts, but here, in front of her, he was just a man in a suit, making decisions and giving instructions. Her focus was on serving the table efficiently, anticipating needs before they were voiced, and keeping a calm presence even as the men's attention wandered between the menu, their phones, and occasional side remarks. As she moved through the restaurant, the soft hum of conversation continued around her. Patrons smiled politely at the service, and the quiet clinks of dishes added to the rhythm of the evening. There was a sense of routine here, of familiarity, yet something about this table stood out. The way they leaned back in their chairs, the confidence in their gestures, the subtle but unmistakable signs of wealth. These were things she had only read about, glimpsed through the screens of her phone. Now she was experiencing it up close. Despite the intimidating presence of the table, she maintained her focus, noting each detail that might make their experience smoother. A glass was never left empty for long, a napkin replaced before it could become crumpled, a plate removed immediately after it was finished. Her attention to these details was not about impressing anyone. It was about doing her job well, about finding pride in the small victories of service, in the subtle art of making someone else's evening effortless. The older man, the one with the commanding presence, leaned back in his chair as she approached. He spoke in a language she understood only partially, Arabic. His tone was casual, almost joking, and though she caught only fragments of the words, the intent was clear. He was mocking something, though whether it was the menu, the service, or perhaps her herself, she couldn't be sure. The moment passed quickly, and he turned back to his companions, laughing softly at his own remark. She kept her composure. This was not the first time someone had spoken down to her, though it was unusual to hear such words so openly, so confidently. Many people underestimated her because of her quiet nature, her unassuming appearance, and her uniform. But she had learned early on that strength didn't always have to be loud. Could be calm, steady, and deliberate. She finished taking their order with the same polite smile, her tone soft but clear, leaving the table without hesitation. As she moved away, her mind briefly wandered to the life she led outside of the restaurant. The cramped apartment she shared with her family, the evenings spent studying languages online, the dreams that seemed distant yet persistent. She reminded herself that every shift was a step forward, a way to keep her dreams alive. Even moments like this, where she felt the subtle sting of judgment, were reminders of why she worked so hard, why she kept learning, and why she carried herself with quiet dignity. Back in the kitchen, she washed her hands and prepared for the next round of service. The other staff members were busy with their own tables, and the clatter of dishes filled the room. She moved efficiently, balancing trays and plates, her mind alert for any new requests. The evening was long, but she welcomed the pace, kept her grounded, kept her present, and allowed her to focus on the details that mattered. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the restaurant windows, casting a warm glow on the polished floors. Inside, the world felt contained, a small stage where people from vastly different lives intersected for a few hours. She was acutely aware of her position in that world, of the boundaries drawn by wealth and status, and yet she carried herself with a sense of self-respect that no amount of money could touch. As she moved past the table again, she caught a glimpse of the older man speaking to his companions, gesturing in a way that seemed both confident and dismissive. She didn't react outwardly, but a quiet determination settled in her chest. She knew that words, carefully chosen, could hold power, and she reminded herself to stay calm, to observe, and to respond only when the time was right. For now, her role was to serve, to maintain professionalism, and to navigate the evening with poise. The minutes passed, each one a careful balance of service and observation. She anticipated needs before they were voiced, refilled drinks, replaced napkins, and cleared plates with an efficiency that drew quiet admiration from colleagues and subtle acknowledgement from patrons. She was a ghost moving through the room, present yet unobtrusive, her competence evident in every gesture. In those moments, she reflected on the strength it took to remain composed under scrutiny, to carry oneself with dignity in the face of judgment, and to maintain hope in a life filled with ordinary struggles. She knew that opportunities could arise from unexpected places, that resilience was often rewarded in ways that were not immediately visible. And so she continued, moving from table to table, her mind focused, her heart steady, her spirit quietly strong. Even as the evening wore on, and the restaurant's energy shifted from casual chatter to a more relaxed, evening pace, she remained vigilant. The table with the billionaire and his companions continued to draw attention, their presence a constant reminder of the differences in wealth and status that defined the social landscape of the restaurant. But she moved past them with the same calm, attentive care, aware of her worth and the value of her skills. By the time the first guests began to leave and the restaurant grew quieter, she had completed countless small acts of service that, together, created an atmosphere of comfort and elegance. Her focus had never wavered, and she had maintained a composure that spoke louder than any words could. She knew that the night was far from over, that challenges could arise at any moment, and that the true test of her strength might be yet to come. As she wiped down the last table before a brief pause, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She thought about her family, her dreams, and the path she was forging through patience, hard work, and quiet resilience. She knew that her life was ordinary in many ways, but she also knew that strength often lay in the ordinary, in the choices made daily, and in the courage to maintain dignity when it was most tested. Tonight was just another step in that journey, and she faced it with determination, awareness, and an inner calm that no external force could easily shake. The restaurant had settled into a quiet rhythm as the evening wore on. Plates were being cleared with precision, drinks refilled, and conversations moved in soft, low tones that added to the elegance of the place. Among the servers, the young woman from earlier continued to move with grace and efficiency. Her eyes scanned the room, noting any need before it was voiced, and her steps were steady, never hurried, never flustered. It was during moments like these that she felt the subtle pride of her work, the quiet satisfaction that came from doing her job well despite its challenges. The billionaire and his companions remained at their table, their laughter and conversation slightly louder than the rest of the room. The older man, in particular, seemed to enjoy the attention he commanded. He leaned back in his chair, exuding confidence, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth as if he were privy to a private joke. His companions chuckled along, some glancing at the young woman as she approached to take another order. There was a sense of superiority in their gestures, an unspoken assertion of status that was both intimidating and impossible to ignore. As she stepped closer with the tray of drinks, he spoke in Arabic again. This time, the words were directed more clearly, and though she did not understand every syllable, the tone was unmistakable. It was mocking, playful perhaps to him, but edged with arrogance. The others at the table laughed softly, eyes flicking toward her, waiting for her reaction. She felt a momentary sting, not because she doubted herself, but because she had encountered this kind of treatment before, and it never failed to feel sharp. Her first instinct was to maintain her professional composure. She had been taught, both at home and at work, that responding to mockery in anger rarely served anyone. Instead, she took a deep breath, keeping her expression neutral, her posture steady. Every step she took toward the table was deliberate, a reflection of confidence even when her heart beat a little faster. She placed the drinks carefully in front of each person, acknowledging the request with a soft, polite tone, ensuring there was no hint of tension in her voice. For a moment, the billionaire seemed to study her. Perhaps he expected a stammer, a nervous glance, or a flustered apology. Instead, he found calm efficiency. She returned to the kitchen quietly, her mind working in the background to process the encounter. She replayed the words she had heard, thinking about their meaning and the intent behind them. There was no immediate need to react, but she knew that if she chose the right moment, she could shift the balance of power subtly with words alone. Back in the kitchen, she took a brief pause, leaning against the counter and allowing herself a moment of thought. She reflected on how people often judged others based on appearance, assuming that uniforms and modest clothing meant simplicity or ignorance. She had learned early that strength could be quiet, that knowledge did not always need to be visible, and that timing was everything. Responding too soon, too harshly could be dangerous. Waiting, observing, and preparing allowed her to turn a potentially humiliating moment into an opportunity for dignity. Meanwhile, the billionaire continued his conversation, unaware of the resolve forming in the young woman. He gestured with his hands, speaking with authority, joking lightly at the expense of the staff. There was a certain arrogance to his demeanor, a belief that the world would bend to his understanding and status. The other diners noticed his energy, some with admiration, others with quiet discomfort. Yet in the midst of this, the young woman moved efficiently, her presence almost invisible, though she was acutely aware of every nuance. Her colleagues whispered quietly among themselves, noting the tension but hesitant to intervene. They knew her reputation for handling difficult situations, and there was a quiet respect in their eyes. Even in a world that often dismissed her, they recognized her intelligence and capability. The young woman herself was aware of this, but she did not rely on it for comfort. Her strength came from within, from a steady confidence in her own worth and skills. As the evening progressed, she continued her rounds, noting small gestures and actions that could improve the experience for the guests. A misplaced utensil was corrected without drawing attention, a glass of water replenished before it was empty, a menu adjusted to show a better angle. These were the invisible details that spoke louder than words, subtle demonstrations of care and skill. Yet, all the while, the words in Arabic lingered in her mind, a challenge and a reminder of the subtle imbalance of power at play. Finally, a moment came when the older man made another remark, again in Arabic, loud enough for her to hear clearly this time. The words were meant to belittle, to provoke a reaction that would amuse him and his companions. The young woman paused, her hands stilling for a brief second as she considered the situation. She realized that the choice before her was simple yet significant. She could remain silent and preserve immediate safety, or she could respond and assert her dignity, risking embarrassment or confrontation. Her decision was made internally with calm certainty. She had spent years preparing for moments like this, developing skills, learning languages, and cultivating the quiet confidence that came from self-awareness. The uniform she wore did not define her, nor did the casual arrogance of a wealthy stranger. In that moment, she understood that words held power, and that the right words, delivered with composure, could change the entire dynamic. She approached the table again, her steps measured, her expression serene. The room seemed to quiet slightly, a sense of anticipation hanging in the air, though no one outside the table knew why. Her colleagues watched discreetly, sensing something important was about to happen. She drew a breath and prepared to speak, carefully choosing each word in her mind, balancing clarity with politeness, firmness with grace. It was a delicate moment, the kind that tested character and poise, the kind that defined respect and personal strength. As she stood before the table, she met the billionaire's gaze, calm and unwavering. The words she had prepared hovered on her lips, ready to assert knowledge and self-respect without aggression. She would correct assumptions, reveal the depth of her understanding, and do so in a way that left no room for ridicule. The moment stretched, silent yet full of tension, a subtle battle of presence and intellect, waiting for the first move. Though the room was filled with quiet conversation and the soft clatter of dishes, the energy around the table shifted. It was invisible to most but palpable to those paying attention. The young woman's heart beat steadily, her confidence rooted in preparation and self-awareness. She understood the delicate balance of social power, the nuances of communication, and the importance of timing. She was ready. At this point, the billionaire continued speaking, unaware of the quiet determination before him. He gestured as he spoke, laughing softly at his own remarks, confident that the situation was under his control. But the young woman's presence, calm and assured, introduced a subtle but undeniable tension. The balance of power, though outwardly unchanged, was already shifting. She had the knowledge, the skill, and the composure to respond in a way that would surprise him and leave an impression he would not forget. For now, she maintained a polite stance, her hands gently folded in front of her as she waited for the right opening. She had learned that patience was a form of strength, and that responding too early or too aggressively could undermine her position. Her mind reviewed her plan quietly. A simple, direct, and fluent response in Arabic, one that would demonstrate competence, intelligence, and respect. It was a strategy born of experience, observation, and self-confidence. The moment stretched longer than expected, each second building quiet tension. She could feel the weight of expectation from her colleagues, though they were careful not to intrude. The other diners remained unaware, absorbed in their own meals and conversations. And the billionaire, for all his confidence, remained oblivious to the storm quietly brewing before him. The young woman took a final deep breath, steadying herself, preparing to speak, knowing that the words she would deliver could change everything in an instant. Her calm, deliberate movements, the steady expression on her face, and the quiet confidence she exuded set the stage for what was about to happen. She was not acting out of anger or defiance, but from a clear understanding of her worth and abilities. In a world where appearances often dictated respect, she was about to demonstrate that knowledge and capability could not be underestimated, regardless of outward status or attire. The next few moments would test the assumptions of the wealthy, challenge perceptions, and reveal the strength of a quietly determined individual ready to assert herself with intelligence and dignity. The moment had arrived. The restaurant continued its gentle rhythm of soft conversation and the clatter of dishes, but around the table where the billionaire and his companions sat, the energy had shifted. The young woman approached with a calmness that seemed almost natural, though inside her heart there was a quiet surge of determination. She could see the slight curiosity in the billionaire's eyes, the way he leaned forward unconsciously, sensing perhaps a subtle change in the usual dynamic he expected to dominate. As she stopped before the table, she met his gaze directly. Her eyes were steady, unflinching, showing neither fear nor anger, just quiet confidence. The words she had rehearsed in her mind formed clearly and fluently, each syllable carefully measured to convey both clarity and respect. Then, in perfect Arabic, she spoke. Her voice was calm, soft yet firm, the words flowing naturally. She addressed his comment directly, correcting the assumption with politeness and precision. The tone was measured, authoritative, and yet contained no trace of aggression. It was a language of intellect and self-respect, delivered with the clarity of someone who had spent years learning not just the words, but the weight they could carry. For a brief moment, the table was silent. The companions blinked, processing the unexpected turn of events. The billionaire, who had been so certain of his control, froze slightly, caught off guard by the fluency, the knowledge, and the subtle confidence that radiated from her. The laughter that had followed his remark earlier faded, replaced by a quiet, almost shocked acknowledgement that he had underestimated the young woman before him. She continued, elaborating slightly to clarify her point, sharing a little about her background and experience, though without arrogance. She spoke of her education, her time spent learning languages, and her understanding of cultural nuances. Her explanation was brief, factual, and infused with quiet pride. Every word was chosen carefully to assert competence and integrity, to make it unmistakably clear that she was not someone to be dismissed or mocked. The billionaire's face showed the first signs of genuine surprise. His posture shifted subtly, a slight straightening of his back as he processed the reality that the young woman standing before him was far more knowledgeable than he had assumed. He exchanged glances with his companions, whose expressions ranged from astonishment to admiration. It was a moment that neither arrogance nor wealth could easily overcome. It was an encounter of intellect and poise, a subtle lesson in humility. Her colleagues in the background watched quietly, some with barely contained smiles, others with wide-eyed amazement. They had long known the depth of her knowledge, her fluency in languages, and her quiet strength, but to see it displayed in such a direct and effective way was something remarkable. Even other patrons began to notice, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding in what had been a typical evening of fine dining. As the words left her lips, she maintained her calm composure. She did not rush, she did not falter, and she did not let the unexpected attention unbalance her. She had practiced this control for years, learning that strength was not loud or flashy, but steady and deliberate. Her voice remained soft enough to be polite, yet strong enough to convey authority, creating a balance that demanded respect without confrontation. The billionaire's companions began to nod slowly, some murmuring quietly to one another in acknowledgement of her skill. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but she anticipated the moment and allowed a pause, giving him room to respond without provoking conflict. It was a masterful use of timing, showing that true strength could be expressed not only in words but in presence, in the careful management of silence, and in the ability to influence perception without raising a voice. As the silence stretched, the billionaire found himself reconsidering his earlier assumptions. The casual arrogance that had guided his behavior moments ago was replaced by a more thoughtful, almost cautious demeanor. He was learning, perhaps for the first time in that setting, that appearances could be deceiving, and that intelligence and capability were not always visible at first glance. The young woman's composed confidence had altered the dynamics of the table in a way that was both subtle and profound. She finished her brief explanation, her tone remaining calm, her posture steady. Then, with a gentle nod, she stepped back slightly, signaling that her point had been made, and that she had no intention of escalating the situation further. The act was simple, but it carried a weight that was undeniable. She had asserted herself, maintained dignity, and changed the perception of those around her without aggression or disrespect. The billionaire's expression was complex, a mix of surprise, embarrassment, and a dawning respect. He realized that he had been reminded, in the most direct yet polite manner, that wealth and status did not grant the right to belittle or underestimate others. It was a lesson in humility, delivered with finesse and intelligence. His companions, likewise, seemed impressed, nodding subtly and offering quiet acknowledgement of the young woman's skill and poise. Around the restaurant, the atmosphere gradually returned to its normal rhythm, though a quiet energy lingered. Patrons continued their meals, staff continued their service, but those who had witnessed the encounter carried a sense of witnessing something remarkable. A demonstration of human dignity, intelligence, and the quiet power of self-respect. It was the kind of moment that left an impression long after the words were spoken, a reminder that true strength often resided in the most unassuming individuals. Back in the kitchen, her colleagues exchanged quiet glances, some smiling subtly, others shaking their heads in disbelief at the display of competence and grace. The young woman returned briefly, taking a moment to steady herself, her expression composed but her mind still processing the intensity of the interaction. She reminded herself that maintaining composure in such moments was not just about pride but about strategy and awareness. It was a skill she had honed over time, and tonight it had been tested and proven. Meanwhile, at the table, the billionaire leaned back slightly, his demeanor noticeably altered. There was no longer the easy arrogance, the assumption that everyone around him would simply acquiesce to his authority. Instead, there was a measured caution, a recognition that the young woman before him possessed qualities that could not be ignored. His mind seemed to be working rapidly, reevaluating both his assumptions and his approach to interactions with those he might have previously dismissed. The other companions followed suit, their laughter gone, replaced by thoughtful silence. The power dynamics at the table had subtly but decisively shifted, demonstrating that intellect, confidence, and poise could assert influence without overt displays of force or status. The young woman's calm response had effectively rebalanced the social equation, showing that dignity and knowledge were forces that commanded respect in any environment. As she moved away from the table, her steps light and controlled, she returned to her routine, attending to other guests and ensuring that the evening continued smoothly. Her actions were deliberate, reinforcing the impression that she was professional and competent in every task she undertook. The incident, though significant, did not disrupt her work. Instead, it highlighted her ability to maintain grace under pressure, to assert herself without confrontation, and to navigate complex social situations with intelligence and tact. In the moments that followed, the billionaire continued his meal with a more reflective attitude, occasionally glancing toward her, perhaps assessing the depth of her knowledge or reconsidering the assumptions he had made earlier. The companions, too, appeared thoughtful, their expressions revealing the subtle impact of her words. The restaurant, for its part, hummed with the quiet elegance that had defined the evening from the start, but now it carried an added layer of intrigue, a sense that something remarkable had occurred within its walls. Her colleagues, inspired by the display, returned to their work with renewed focus and admiration. They recognized that they had witnessed not just a correction of arrogance but a demonstration of human dignity, intellect, and the quiet power of composure. It was a lesson in resilience and self-respect, a reminder that even in situations where one might feel small or underestimated, strength and intelligence could shine through in the most effective ways. By the end of the evening, the young woman had completed her shifts with the same care and attention she always demonstrated, but now with an added layer of accomplishment. She had navigated a complex social challenge, asserted her worth, and left a lasting impression on those who had underestimated her. The experience reinforced her confidence, reminding her that dignity and knowledge were forces that could not be ignored, no matter the circumstances or the status of those around her. As she finally prepared to leave for the night, her thoughts lingered on the interaction. She understood that true strength often revealed itself in calm, measured responses, in the ability to maintain composure under scrutiny, and in the subtle assertion of self-respect. The evening had tested her in ways that few moments ever did, and she had emerged with her dignity intact, her confidence reinforced, and her quiet power evident to all who had witnessed it. The lesson was clear. Respect is earned through integrity, knowledge, and poise, and those qualities can leave an impact far greater than any display of wealth or status could ever achieve. The restaurant had returned to its usual rhythm, but the air around the billionaire's table was different. The soft clatter of dishes and quiet chatter continued, yet there was a subtle tension lingering, as though the room itself acknowledged the remarkable moment that had just occurred. The young woman, having returned to her duties, moved with the same grace and efficiency, yet there was a sense of quiet triumph in her composure. She continued serving other tables, her focus intact, but her mind lingered on the interaction and its unexpected consequences. The billionaire sat back in his chair, quietly processing the exchange. For someone accustomed to having authority recognized without question, the encounter had been a jolt. He had underestimated the young woman entirely, assuming that her uniform and position reflected a lack of experience or knowledge. Yet, her fluent, calm, and precise response had challenged that assumption in the most effective way possible. He realized that his casual arrogance had been misplaced, and a flush of embarrassment colored his features. It was a rare moment of humility, one he rarely experienced, especially in public. His companions shifted uncomfortably, sensing the shift in energy. There was no laughter now, no confident jokes to mask insecurity. They were beginning to understand that the young woman before them possessed a quiet strength that demanded respect. Her intelligence and poise had upended the expected dynamic, leaving the billionaire and his entourage with a newfound awareness that appearances were often deceiving. The realization was subtle, yet profound, and it changed the way he regarded the staff, if only temporarily. The young woman continued her work, clearing tables, arranging cutlery, and delivering orders with practiced skill. Despite the attention she had drawn, she maintained a professional demeanor. She understood that true dignity was demonstrated through consistent behavior, not through boastful gestures or displays of superiority. Her colleagues noticed the quiet confidence she exuded, a confidence that seemed to ripple through the staff, inspiring respect and admiration. The restaurant, a space of wealth and power, now also held a subtle lesson in humility and human dignity. As the billionaire reflected on the encounter, he began to consider the assumptions he had made, not just about this young woman, but about others who might have been quietly underestimated throughout his life. He realized that his own perspective had been narrow, shaped by privilege and status, and that intelligence, capability, and strength were not always obvious at first glance. This insight was unsettling but valuable, forcing him to confront a side of himself that rarely faced challenge or correction. He observed the young woman as she moved among the tables, noting the ease with which she managed multiple tasks simultaneously. Each motion was deliberate, precise, and efficient. Her ability to anticipate the needs of guests without being asked reflected both training and innate skill. He began to see the depth of her capability, understanding that her work required far more than simple obedience. It demanded intelligence, emotional awareness, and adaptability. The realization left him both impressed and humbled. Throughout the restaurant, whispers circulated among the staff. Some exchanged quiet nods, others smiled discreetly, acknowledging the young woman's composure and skill. It was a reminder to all that strength often existed in unassuming forms, that dignity and intelligence were not always obvious, and that respect was something to be earned through action and character rather than assumed through status or wealth. The young woman, unaware of every subtle acknowledgement, continued her work, her focus unwavering, her movements precise. Meanwhile, the billionaire remained at his table, the weight of his reflections apparent in his posture. He began to consider his approach to interactions beyond the restaurant, recognizing that his assumptions about people were often guided by superficial indicators such as appearance, clothing, or role. This realization prompted a deeper awareness of human behavior and the need for humility in judgment. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that respect must be mutual and that intelligence and capability were qualities that existed in all strata of society. He watched as she efficiently handled the demands of other guests, noting how seamlessly she balanced multiple responsibilities. Her calmness in the face of scrutiny and her unwavering composure demonstrated a rare form of strength. He felt a pang of regret for the arrogance he had displayed earlier, a recognition that his actions had been inappropriate and dismissive. Yet he also felt admiration, an acknowledgement of the subtle power she had wielded without confrontation, aggression, or complaint. The young woman herself was largely unaware of the depth of impact she had had. To her, it was simply another night of work, another shift to complete with care and precision. Yet, in those few moments of confrontation, she had subtly shifted the perception of those around her. Her actions demonstrated that competence, dignity, and self-respect could command recognition and alter dynamics, even in a setting dominated by wealth and power. As the evening progressed, the billionaire's demeanor softened further. His initial embarrassment gave way to reflection, and he began to consider the implications of his behavior for future interactions. He realized that empathy, awareness, and humility were essential traits in dealing with others, regardless of their social or professional standing. This understanding prompted a reconsideration of his approach, a willingness to engage more thoughtfully and respectfully, and an acknowledgement that strength often lay in unexpected forms. The young woman continued her routine, attending to each table with care and attention. Her colleagues watched in quiet admiration, recognizing the subtle authority she had established through calm confidence and skillful communication. Patrons remained largely unaware of the profound social lesson unfolding before them, yet the atmosphere carried an unspoken recognition of dignity and intelligence in action. The balance of respect had shifted, subtly but irrevocably, and the young woman's presence had played a central role in that transformation. Throughout the remainder of the evening, she maintained the same professional focus that had defined her work. She anticipated needs, corrected minor mistakes with efficiency, and navigated the complexities of the restaurant environment with poise. Her actions reinforced the impression of competence and integrity, demonstrating that true strength often resided in consistent, quiet excellence rather than in overt displays of authority. As the final guests departed, the young woman took a moment to reflect on the events of the evening. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, not from the acknowledgement of her skills, but from the knowledge that she had navigated a challenging social interaction with dignity and composure. The encounter had tested her confidence, her patience, and her ability to assert herself without confrontation, and she had emerged with her integrity intact. The billionaire, still seated at his table with his companions, observed her briefly as she completed her duties. There was a marked change in his attitude, a subtle respect that replaced his earlier arrogance. He recognized the intelligence, skill, and composure she had demonstrated, and he understood that his assumptions had been flawed. The encounter had provided him with a rare opportunity for reflection and growth, revealing the importance of humility, awareness, and respect in all interactions. Her colleagues, inspired by her example, returned to their work with renewed focus and admiration. They recognized that they had witnessed a demonstration of human dignity, intelligence, and quiet power, a lesson that extended beyond the boundaries of the restaurant. The young woman's actions had highlighted the value of patience, composure, and thoughtful communication, demonstrating that respect could be earned and perceptions could be changed through skillful and confident behavior. As the restaurant prepared to close for the night, the young woman completed her final tasks, her movements efficient and deliberate. She reflected on the evening's events, recognizing that moments of challenge often provided opportunities for growth, self-expression, and subtle influence. She understood that her ability to navigate complex social dynamics, assert herself with dignity, and maintain composure under scrutiny were strengths that would serve her well in all areas of life. The billionaire, in his private reflections, acknowledged the impact of the evening's events. He had experienced a subtle but profound lesson in humility, the power of quiet confidence, and the importance of respecting the capabilities and dignity of others. The encounter would remain with him, influencing his perceptions, behavior, and interactions long after he left the restaurant. In the quiet moments of closing, the young woman felt a sense of calm accomplishment. She had faced a situation that could have been intimidating or uncomfortable, navigated it with skill and composure, and demonstrated her abilities without arrogance or aggression. Her actions reinforced the importance of patience, awareness, and integrity, and they provided a lasting example of human strength and dignity. As she left the restaurant that night, stepping into the cool air and the quiet hum of the city streets, she carried with her the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had maintained her dignity, asserted her worth, and left a subtle but lasting impression on those who had underestimated her. The evening had tested her resolve, highlighted her skills, and demonstrated the quiet power of intelligence and poise in the face of arrogance. It was a night that would remain with her as a reminder of the strength inherent in composure, respect, and self-assured action. The following days after the incident were different for the young woman. The memory of the evening remained fresh in her mind, not because of fear or worry, but because of the quiet satisfaction she felt. She had faced a moment that could have been intimidating, and she had handled it with grace, confidence, and intelligence. Though she had not sought attention or praise, the effect of her actions rippled beyond the immediate table. Colleagues continued to admire her composure, and even some of the regular patrons who had witnessed the subtle tension commented on her professionalism. Word of her confident response to the billionaire began to spread quietly among the staff and management. While no one had made it a spectacle, there was a shared understanding that her calm, intelligent handling of the situation was remarkable. It was a reminder that respect and dignity could be earned through consistent action and poise rather than status or wealth. For her, it was a validation of the quiet confidence she had always nurtured, a confirmation that her skills and knowledge were meaningful and impactful. Meanwhile, the billionaire had been reflecting deeply on the incident. It was not typical for him to be challenged in such a direct, graceful way, and he realized that the evening had offered a rare lesson in humility and awareness. He began to consider the assumptions he had made, not just about this young woman, but about the broader way he perceived people around him. The arrogance that had guided his behavior in the restaurant was replaced by thoughtful consideration, a recognition that intelligence and skill were often hidden behind appearances. Curiosity, along with a genuine desire to understand and acknowledge her abilities, led him to take a step that surprised his companions and staff alike. The next day, he arranged to visit the restaurant again, this time quietly and without fanfare. He requested to speak with the young woman directly, wanting to convey his acknowledgement and perhaps offer an opportunity to show that he respected her skills beyond that single encounter. When she was called to the manager's office, she was slightly apprehensive, unsure what to expect. The manager, aware of the billionaire's request, explained that he wanted to meet her and discuss a potential opportunity. She nodded politely, her curiosity piqued, and followed the manager to a quiet, private area of the restaurant. There, the billionaire waited, a marked difference in demeanor from the previous evening. Gone was the arrogance. In its place was a measured respect, a recognition of the strength and intelligence she had demonstrated. He spoke first, expressing his admiration for the way she had handled the previous encounter. His tone was sincere, acknowledging not only her fluency and composure, but also her poise and professionalism under pressure. He admitted that he had misjudged her, and that her response had left a lasting impression. The young woman listened quietly, maintaining the same calm demeanor that had defined her throughout the previous evening. She accepted his acknowledgement with polite humility, aware that the recognition, while gratifying, did not define her worth. The billionaire continued, explaining that he had been impressed not just by her fluency in Arabic, but by her ability to navigate a complex social situation with intelligence and grace. He offered her a position in a capacity that would utilize her skills, suggesting a role that went beyond serving tables, one that would allow her to interact in multilingual environments and assist with communication in business or cultural contexts. The offer was unexpected, yet it aligned with her long-held ambitions and interests. She listened carefully, considering the opportunity. It was more than just a job. It was a chance to expand her horizons, to step into a world that had previously seemed distant. Yet she remained grounded, recognizing the responsibility and commitment that such a role would require. Her decision was measured, reflecting both enthusiasm and thoughtfulness. She accepted the offer, understanding that it represented not only personal advancement, but also a chance to demonstrate her capabilities in a broader, more impactful context. Word of the opportunity spread discreetly among the staff, inspiring quiet admiration. The young woman became an example not just of skill and intelligence, but of the importance of patience, composure, and strategic action. Her colleagues recognized that the evening had not only changed perceptions in the moment, but had created opportunities for growth and recognition that extended beyond the restaurant. The billionaire himself observed the changes with interest. He noted the shift in dynamics, the way respect and acknowledgement had developed organically rather than being demanded or enforced. He reflected on the lessons he had learned, recognizing that true leadership required humility, awareness, and the ability to see beyond superficial impressions. The experience had reshaped his understanding of human capability and potential. Over the following weeks, the young woman began her new responsibilities. She found herself in environments that challenged her language skills, cultural awareness, and problem-solving abilities. Each task was an opportunity to demonstrate competence and professionalism, to apply the lessons she had learned from years of dedication and hard work. She approached each challenge with the same calm determination and attention to detail that had defined her previous role, earning respect and admiration in her new position. Her life began to expand in ways she had long imagined but had not yet experienced. She traveled for work, engaged with diverse groups of people, and found herself in situations that required both intellect and diplomacy. The confidence she had demonstrated in the restaurant became a cornerstone for her growth, reinforcing the value of patience, observation, and measured action. Each success built upon the last, and she developed a reputation for skill, reliability, and thoughtful communication. The restaurant remained a part of her life, though no longer as a primary role. She maintained connections with her former colleagues, mentoring some and inspiring others with stories of her experience. Her journey became a reminder that diligence, composure, and self-respect could create opportunities that were previously unimaginable, and that even the quietest moments could hold the potential for profound change. The billionaire continued to follow her progress, occasionally offering guidance or support, recognizing that his initial misjudgment had led to an unexpected opportunity for mutual growth. He reflected on the importance of humility, the recognition of talent regardless of social standing, and the subtle power of human dignity and intelligence. The encounter had left a lasting mark on him, reshaping his approach to interactions and influencing his understanding of leadership and respect. As the young woman settled into her new role, she carried with her the lessons of the restaurant, the value of observation, the importance of measured responses, and the quiet strength inherent in self-confidence and skill. She had demonstrated that respect was earned through competence, composure, and integrity, and that opportunities often arose in moments where courage met preparation. Her journey served as an example to those around her, a testament to the transformative power of quiet intelligence and human dignity. In the months that followed, she continued to excel, expanding her abilities and exploring new challenges. She remained grounded, aware that her growth was the result of both preparation and opportunity. The initial incident with the billionaire became a defining moment, a story of resilience, capability, and the subtle art of asserting oneself with grace and confidence. Her colleagues, the restaurant staff, and even casual patrons occasionally referenced the story, admiring how a single interaction had changed the trajectory of her life. It was a story that spoke to the value of composure, intelligence, and dignity, and it inspired those who heard it to recognize their own potential and the importance of respecting others. The young woman, reflecting on her journey, understood that true success was not measured solely by wealth, position, or recognition, but by the integrity with which one navigated life's challenges. She had faced a situation that could have intimidated her, yet she had responded with intelligence and grace. The outcome had exceeded her expectations, not through luck, but through preparation, skill, and the quiet strength that had always been part of her character. In the end, the encounter served as a powerful reminder of the human qualities that truly matter: respect, humility, competence, and dignity. It showed that even in a world influenced by wealth and status, intelligence and character could command attention and create meaningful change. The young woman's journey illustrated the potential for growth and opportunity that arises when one combines skill, composure, and integrity, leaving a lasting impact on those around her and reshaping the perceptions of those who had once underestimated her. Her story became an inspiration, a reminder that quiet strength and thoughtful action often speak louder than words or appearances. It was a story of resilience, opportunity, and the transformative power of human dignity, a story that would be remembered long after the details of a single evening faded into memory. The young woman had not only changed her own life, but had subtly influenced the worldview of those she encountered, proving that intelligence, patience, and self-respect are forces that can never be underestimated.